In the 1943 Quebec Agreement, Canada and the United Kingdom were contributing partners as they supplied scientists and technicians for the Manhattan Project. The three nations agreed to secrecy, and not even the USSR, an ally, was informed. This agreement was revised in 1944 by the Hyde Park Agreement signed by Winston Churchill and Franklin Roosevelt. Following the war, President Harry S. Truman, far less trusting of the Soviets than his predecessor Franklin D. Roosevelt, see our videos on him, wanted greater security. Why was the atomic energy information still classified after World War II? How large was the Soviet spy network in the USA? Were the Rosenbergs really guilty of selling atomic secrets to the Soviet Union? Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, military veteran, historian, author, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History. This shift into political civilian control was the result of the two atomic bombs dropped on Japan, as the world then knew that the U.S. alone had atomic weapons. Atomic secrets were now the most sensitive. The Atomic Energy Act of 1946, or the McMahon Act, named after Senator Brian McMahon, later revised in 1954, determined the methods of controlling and managing nuclear technology, and with which nations such information could be shared. The primary purpose of the Act ruled was that atomic weapons and nuclear technology fell under the United States Atomic Energy Commission, dictating that the civilian government would control such technology and not the military. During the discussions on the bill, Congress and the intelligence services feared that there was a leak giving the Soviets critical information. This was confirmed when it was learned that Igor Guzenko, a Soviet cipher clerk and lieutenant in the Soviet intelligence corps stationed at the Soviet embassy in Ottawa, had defected on February 16, 1946. Guzenko gave solid evidence that the USSR had been spying on Canada, Britain, and the United States during the war, complete with a list of traitors, which resulted in the arrest of 22 people. Senator McMahon ordered a special hearing involving the FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, Secretary of State James F. Burns, and General Leslie Groves, who managed the atomic bomb project, and Groves revealed that British physicist Alan Nunn May had passed Manhattan Project secrets to the Soviets. Some of those names were Americans who were working for the Soviets, such as Ethel and Julius Rosenberg, accused of providing top-secret information about American radar, sonar, jet propulsion engines, and nuclear weapon designs. Julius Rosenberg served as an engineer inspector in the Army Signal Corps engineering laboratories near Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, which dealt with research on electronics, communications, radar, and guided missile controls from 1940 until 1945, until being discharged due to his previous membership in the American Communist Party. It was later charged that Rosenberg was working with Soviet NKVD spy Alexander Felixov and provided thousands of classified reports from Emerson Radio, including a complete proximity fuse used in the atomic bomb Little Man. Under Felixov's supervision, Rosenberg recruited several others into working for the NKVD, including Joel Barr, Alfred Sarant, William Pearl, and Morton Sobel. And Pearl provided thousands of documents from the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. Some of what he delivered included all design and production drawings for Lockheed's P-80 Shooting Star, America's first jet fighter. Rosenberg informed Felixov that his wife Ethel's brother, David Greenglass, was working on the top-secret Manhattan Project at the Los Alamos National Laboratory. He directed Julius to recruit Greenglass. Julius Rosenberg recruited Manhattan Project information engineer Russell McNutt in February 1944, who worked on designs for the plants at Oak Ridge National Laboratory regarding weapons-grade uranium, and Rosenberg received a $100 cash bonus. The Rosenbergs still remained under the radar until August 1948, when Time magazine's senior editor, Whittaker Chambers, was called by the House Committee on Un-American Activities to corroborate the testimony of Elizabeth Bentley. Bentley was a Soviet spy who had defected in 1945 and accused dozens of members of the U.S. government of espionage. One official she named as possibly connected to the Soviets was Alger Hiss, a former government lawyer and State Department official who helped create the United Nations. Hiss was not convicted of espionage, but he was convicted of perjury for lying to a federal grand jury. When Stalin announced that the Soviet Union had its first successful nuclear test on August 29, 1949, the news sent shockwaves throughout the free world, as the Iron Curtain had fallen and the Cold War was quite frigid. U.S. intelligence agencies cranked into high gear to find out how it happened, and in January 1950, the government learned that German Jewish emigre and theoretical physicist Klaus Fuchs, who was part of the British component in the Manhattan Project, supplied the Soviets with atomic secrets throughout the war. Under interrogation, Fuchs identified his courier as American trader Harry Gold, who was arrested on May 23, 1950. Fuchs, who was charged under the 1917 Espionage Act, gave up everyone. Gold also caved in and gave information, and on June 15, 1950, David Greenglass, Ethel Rosenberg's brother, was arrested by the FBI for espionage and soon confessed to having passed secret information on to the USSR through Gold. Greenglass said his sister, Ethel's husband Julius Rosenberg, had convinced David's wife, Ruth, to recruit him while visiting him in Albuquerque, New Mexico in 1944. According to him, Julius had passed secrets to Soviet contact agent Anatoly Yakovlev, a connection critical if there was to be a successful prosecution of the Rosenbergs. On July 17, 1950, Julius Rosenberg was arrested for espionage, based upon Greenglass's confession. Ethel Rosenberg was arrested after testifying before a grand jury on August 11, 1950. Morton Sobel fled to Mexico City with his family after Greenglass's arrest, where they took assumed names, and he tried to figure out a way to reach Europe without a passport. Abandoning that effort, he returned to Mexico City. Sobel claimed that he was kidnapped by the Mexican secret police and taken to the U.S. border, where he was arrested by U.S. authorities. But the U.S. government claimed Sobel was arrested by the Mexican police for bank robbery on August 16, 1950, and extradited the next day to the United States in Laredo, Texas. Gordon Dean, the chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, said, "It looks as though Rosenberg is the kingpin of a very large ring, and if there is any way of breaking him by having the shadow of a death penalty over him, we want to do it." Miles Lane, a member of the prosecution team, said that the case against Ethel Rosenberg was not too strong, but that it was very important that she be convicted too and given a stiff sentence. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover wrote that proceeding against the wife will serve as a lever to make her husband Julius confess. On August 17th, the grand jury returned a true bill on 11 charges against Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, David Greenglass, and Anatoly Yakovlev. The Rosenbergs were convicted in 1951 and executed in 1953 at Sing Sing Correctional Facility in Ossining, New York, becoming the first American civilians to be executed for such charges and the first to be executed during peacetime. They were buried on June 21st at Wellwood Cemetery, a Jewish cemetery in Pine Lawn, New York. The New York Times reported that 500 people attended and some 10,000 stood outside the funeral. The others were sentenced to prison terms, including David Greenglass due to a plea agreement, Harry Gold, and Morton Sobel. Klaus Fuchs was tried and convicted in the United Kingdom. Many people, including the Rosenberg's sons Michael and Robert Meeropol, have maintained that Julius and Ethel were innocent of all charges and were victims of Cold War paranoia. However, when the U.S. government released declassified information after the fall of the Soviet Union, it concluded many decoded Soviet cables detailing Julius's role as a courier and recruiter for the Soviets, and information about Ethel's role as an accessory who helped recruit her brother David into the spy ring. In 2008, the National Archives of the United States published most of the grand jury testimony related to the prosecution of the Rosenbergs. Of interest, in his 2001 book, Alexander Vexilov claimed that Julius Rosenberg was originally recruited to spy for the Interior Ministry of the Soviet Union, NKVD, on Labor Day 1942 by a former spy master, Semyon Semyonov. Vexilov also said he, meaning Julius, didn't understand anything about the atomic bomb and he couldn't help us, and that Rosenberg had been introduced to Semyonov by Bernard Schuster, a high-ranking member of the American Communist Party and the NKVD liaison for Old Browder. After Semyonov returned to Moscow in 1944, Vexilov took over. Nikita Khrushchev wrote in his memoir that he cannot specifically say what kind of help the Rosenbergs provided us, but that he learned from Joseph Stalin and Vyacheslav Molotov that they had provided very significant help in accelerating the production of our atomic bomb. However, Boris B. Brokovich, the engineer who later became director of the plutonium production reactor and extraction facility Chelyabinsk-40 that created the USSR's first atomic bomb material, claimed Khrushchev was a, quote, silly fool. Brokovich claimed the Soviets developed their own bomb by trial and error. You sat the Rosenbergs in the electric chair for nothing, he said. We got nothing from the Rosenbergs. In 2001, David Greenglass said he gave false testimony to protect himself and his wife, Ruth, and that he was encouraged by the prosecution to do so. My wife is more important to me than my sister, or my mother, or my father, okay? And she was the mother of my children, he said. Morton Sobel was interviewed by the New York Times in September 2008, and he admitted that he had given documents to the Soviets, but they dealt with defensive radar and weaponry. He still claimed that Julius Rosenberg was in a conspiracy that delivered to the Soviets classified material and industrial information on the atomic bomb, and he never told me anything else that he was engaged in. In the 2009 book, Spies, The Rise and Fall of the KGB in America, by John Earl Haynes, Harvey Clare, and Alexander Vasiliev, Vasiliev notes that the KGB information regarding the Rosenbergs was questionable. It claimed that Julius Rosenberg was an effective agent and his wife Ethel a supporter of his work. According to Vasiliev, Julius and Ethel worked personally with KGB agents who were given the codenames Twain and Callistratus, as being who recruited Greenglass and McNutt for the Manhattan Project spy mission. All of this information had been in U.S. hands during the Venona decryptions in the 1940s. The Rosenberg's sons state that Julius was guilty of conspiracy, though not of atomic spying, while Ethel was only generally aware of his activities. The children say that their father did not deserve the death penalty and that their mother was wrongly convicted. They continue to campaign for their mother to be exonerated to this day. The Rosenbergs were the only American civilians executed for espionage during the Cold War.
Thanks for watching today's episode of Forgotten History. If you like this episode, please consider becoming a channel member or joining our Patreon page. This would help us offset the ever-increasing cost of production. As always, please like, share, and comment. And if you have any show ideas, please contact us, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Until next time.